Located in the eastern reaches of the Bay of Bengal, North Sentinel Island is one of the most geographically secluded and culturally enigmatic places on Earth. Measuring approximately 60 square kilometers, the island is part of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago, an Indian Union territory composed of more than 500 islands. North Sentinel stands apart both physically and symbolically. It is encircled by a jagged ring of coral reefs that make it extremely difficult to approach by boat. There are no natural harbors or welcoming coves, and its shallow coastal shelf, coupled with powerful tidal surges, creates a constantly shifting aquatic barrier. Even experienced navigators can find themselves at the mercy of these hidden dangers. From aerial imagery, the island appears as a dense green mass, its interior entirely cloaked by tropical rainforest. No roads cut through the foliage. No buildings pierce the canopy. There are no visible signs of agriculture or animal domestication. It is, in every sense, a place visually frozen in time, untouched by the mechanized sprawl of modern civilization. While satellite surveillance has confirmed some minimal footpaths and clearings, these are the only visible indications of human presence. Unlike nearby islands, which have been developed for tourism, infrastructure, or habitation, North Sentinel remains locked in a state of deep, deliberate inaccessibility. Despite its obscurity, North Sentinel is surrounded by an unmistakable aura of both danger and fascination. The Indian government enforces a strict no-access policy with a 5 nautical mile buffer zone surrounding the island. Aircraft are prohibited from flying overhead at low altitude, and sea vessels are required to steer well clear. This legal framework is not just a bureaucratic shield, it is a life-preserving necessity. The people who live on this island, known as the Sentinelese, have had minimal to no sustained contact with the outside world and possess no natural immunity to common pathogens. Even a minor cold could prove catastrophic if introduced to their community. Geologists believe the island is a product of ancient volcanic activity, now dormant and overtaken by thick jungle. Its isolation has likely protected rare plant and animal species, some of which may be undocumented due to the total absence of on-foot scientific exploration. The surrounding waters are biologically rich, fed by monsoonal currents and tidal upwellings that support coral reefs and seagrass beds, vital resources for shallow water fishing, which the island's inhabitants rely on. The island's remoteness, combined with its strict legal protection and the absolute rejection of outsiders by its people, has created a unique paradox. In a world where even the most remote corners are mapped and monitored, here lies a place that remains, by choice and necessity, largely unknown. And within that unknown, North Sentinel continues to resist not only physical entry, but also cultural comprehension. The Sentinelese are among the last known groups of humans to have avoided sustained contact with the outside world. Based on limited observations from a distance, their estimated population ranges from as few as 50 to as many as 150 individuals. However, due to the island's inaccessibility and the people's resistance to any approach, these estimates remain speculative. Unlike many other isolated groups around the world, the Sentinelese have not been studied up close, and no anthropological fieldwork has been conducted directly among them. Their language remains entirely unclassified. It does not resemble any of the known languages spoken by other tribes in the Andaman Islands, such as the Jarawa or the Ongsh. Linguists believe it could be a linguistic isolate, meaning it is unrelated to any other language family known to exist. This further emphasizes the possibility that the Sentinelese have been cut off for thousands of years, maintaining a unique cultural and linguistic identity that has evolved independently. Their tools are simple but purposeful. Observations have shown that they use spears, arrows, and rudimentary knives, many of which are tipped with metal salvaged from shipwrecks that have run aground on their reefs. This scavenged material is shaped and used without evidence of smelting or metalworking, suggesting a Stone Age level technological base with rare adaptations made from modern debris. Clothing is minimal, often limited to plant-based belts or adornments, and there is no visible sign of pottery, writing, or agriculture. Despite their technological simplicity, the Sentinelese demonstrate complex behavior in terms of territory defense, group organization, and tool use. They construct temporary shelters along the shoreline and appear to have designated lookout points. When outsiders have approached, responses have been quick and coordinated, indicating a strong sense of communal awareness and decision-making. There are no known photographs of the island's interior or its people taken from ground level in recent years. Most sightings have been from helicopters or distant boats, with the Sentinelese often retreating into the jungle if they sense surveillance. Their elusive behavior has only added to the air of mystery surrounding them, making it impossible to confirm how they govern themselves. What their spiritual beliefs may be, or how their society is structured, the Sentinelese are protected not only by geographical isolation, but also by international law. India recognizes them as a sovereign people and forbids any attempt to make contact. This legal barrier is designed to safeguard their health, autonomy, and way of life. With no immunity to modern diseases, even a short visit could result in a deadly outbreak. As a result, the Sentinelese remain a rare example of a community that exists beyond the influence of globalization. They are living proof that human cultures can survive, independently, resiliently, and on their own terms when left undisturbed. Their continued existence raises powerful questions about human diversity, cultural boundaries, and the ethics of exploration in the 21st century. Human interaction with North Sentinel Island has always been rare and often dangerous. The earliest recorded mention of the island came in the year 1880, when British colonial officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to the island as part of his efforts to study the indigenous tribes of the Andaman Islands. Portman and his team captured 6 Sentinelese individuals, 2 elderly people and 4 children, and brought them to Port Blair, the capital of the Andaman Islands. Tragically, the 2 elders died of disease shortly after, likely due to their lack of immunity to outside pathogens. The children were eventually returned to the island, but the event left a lasting impact on the tribe's perception of outsiders. For nearly a century following that incident, North Sentinel remained largely undisturbed. Its isolation was partially protected by the surrounding coral reefs, which made navigation treacherous for even the most experienced sailors. However, accidental contact would occasionally occur, most notably in the year 1981, when the cargo ship Primrose ran aground on a reef just off the island's coast. The crew, stranded and awaiting rescue, reported seeing groups of armed Sentinelese watching them from the shoreline. Though they were never attacked directly, the threat was clear. The crew was eventually rescued by helicopter and the ship was left to decay in the shallows. Between the years 1967 and 1991, a series of government-sponsored contact expeditions took place. Led primarily by anthropologist Triloknath Pandit and supported by the Indian government, these attempts involve cautiously approaching the island by boat, leaving gifts such as coconuts, bananas, and iron tools on the beach, and then retreating without direct engagement. During some of these visits, Sentinelese individuals would appear on the shore, occasionally taking the offerings, or watching silently from the tree line. But even after decades of trying, no sustained, peaceful contact was ever established. In the year 1991, Pandit declared the efforts a failure and ended the program. He later stated that continued contact risked damaging the tribe both physically and culturally. By that point, the risks of introducing diseases to a population with no immunity had become more widely understood, and India began to shift its policy from outreach to protection. One of the most defining moments in recent history came in the year 2006, when 2 fishermen illegally approached the island to fish for crabs. Their boat drifted too close to the shore overnight and was found the next morning, abandoned and damaged. The men had been killed, their bodies visible from a distance, but impossible to retrieve due to the tribe's hostile response to recovery attempts. This event reinforced the island's deadly reputation and re-emphasized the Indian government's stance on absolute non-interference. Since then, the Indian government has maintained a strict exclusion zone around the island, prohibiting any approach within 3 nautical miles. Patrols are carried out by the Indian Navy and Coast Guard to enforce this buffer and prevent illegal contact. North Sentinel has, in effect, become one of the most off-limits places on Earth. These encounters, both deliberate and accidental, paint a picture of a people who have made a clear choice to remain isolated. Their reactions are not those of ignorance or fear, but of deliberate defense. Each interaction with the outside world has been met with caution or aggression, and their history makes one thing unmistakably clear: the Sentinelese want to be left alone. In the modern world, there are very few places where national law stops at the shoreline, but North Sentinel Island is one of them. Although it lies within Indian territory, the island exists in a legal and administrative gray zone that has been carefully constructed to ensure one thing: total isolation. The Indian government, recognizing the Sentinelese peoples, desire to remain untouched, has gone to great lengths to create policies that protect the tribe from the outside world and protect the outside world from them. In the year 1956, the island was officially designated as a tribal reserve under the Andaman and Nicobar Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Regulation. This early law prohibited any travel within 3 nautical miles of the island without special permission. Over time, the regulation became increasingly strict, especially after failed contact attempts and fatal encounters underscored the danger of uninvited visits. By the early 2000s, the Indian government had shifted from outreach to passive protection. In the year 2005, North Sentinel was removed from India's official tourism maps. 3 years later, in 2008, the government fully banned any approach or photography of the island, citing public safety and the tribe's vulnerability to disease. These restrictions remain in place today, enforced by regular patrols from the Indian Navy and Coast Guard, who monitor the surrounding waters and intercept any unauthorized boats. The Sentinelese are unique in that they are one of the few groups on Earth not subject to national law in any conventional sense. Indian authorities have repeatedly emphasized that the tribe is to be left alone, even in extreme circumstances. For example, after the deaths of 2 fishermen in the year 2006 and American missionary John Allen Chow in the year 2018, Indian officials made it clear that no arrests would be made and that the tribe would not be held legally accountable. The priority, they stated, was to avoid further contact or conflict. Internationally, the treatment of the Sentinelese has prompted both praise and debate. Human rights organizations, including Survival International, have voiced strong support for India's hands-off approach, arguing that uncontacted tribes should be allowed to live without interference. The United Nations has also acknowledged the tribe's right to self-isolation, highlighting North Sentinel as an example of extreme cultural preservation. However, the island has also raised difficult questions. What happens if a plane crashes near its shores? What if a Sentinelese individual seeks help or is injured? To these hypotheticals, the Indian government has offered a consistent reply: non-intervention. Their stance is clear: unless the tribe itself initiates contact, the rest of the world must stay away. Even in the age of satellites and global internet, the island remains invisible in a legal and cultural sense. No census includes them. No Indian law is actively enforced within their borders, and no roadmap exists for their future. In a world increasingly connected, North Sentinel Island stands defiantly alone, protected not just by distance, but by law and intent. Despite international protections and the Indian government's firm policies, North Sentinel Island has not always remained untouched. A handful of fatal encounters over the decades have thrust the island into the global spotlight and served as sobering reminders of the invisible boundary that must not be crossed. One of the earliest and most shocking incidents occurred in the year 1981. The cargo ship MV Primrose ran aground on a coral reef just off North Sentinel's coast during a storm. Stranded for several days, the crew reported seeing small figures emerging from the forest and approaching the wreck with bows and arrows. The men radioed for emergency rescue, and a helicopter eventually airlifted them to safety before a confrontation occurred. The wreckage of the Primrose remains rusting near the reef to this day, a ghostly reminder of that close call. In the year 2006, 2 Indian fishermen, Sundar Raj and Pandit Tiwari, were illegally poaching crabs in the waters near North Sentinel. Their boat drifted too close to the island and was found the next day with both men reportedly killed by the Sentinelese. The Indian Coast Guard attempted to recover their bodies using a helicopter, but were forced to retreat after being met with a volley of arrows. The bodies were never retrieved. Instead, officials decided to respect the tribe's isolation and ended the search. Perhaps the most well-known incident occurred in the year 2018, when American missionary John Allen Chow attempted to make contact with the tribe. Believing it was his religious duty to bring Christianity to the Sentinelese, he paid local fishermen to smuggle him close to the island. After a failed first attempt where he was shot at by arrows, he returned days later. According to the fishermen, Chow was seen being struck and dragged away by tribesmen. His body was never recovered. The story made international headlines and reignited debate over whether any contact with uncontacted peoples should be attempted. These incidents have all ended the same way, either with retreat or tragedy. The consistent thread is the tribe's determination to defend its land and the world's eventual acceptance that their wishes must be respected. Each time the boundary has been crossed, the Sentinelese have responded with hostility, not out of malice, but out of a deep and generational instinct for survival. Their way of life has remained intact because of this fierce resistance. The Indian government's reaction to each of these events has been notably restrained. There have been no attempts at retaliation, no arrests, and no forced recoveries. Instead, officials have repeatedly emphasized that these incidents only strengthen the case for strict non-interference. Over time, these encounters have become cautionary tales, a warning to adventurers, missionaries, and tourists alike. This island is not a place to visit. Today, these stories serve as some of the only documented interactions with the tribe. In a world where even the remotest places are captured by drones and mapped in high resolution, North Sentinel remains an enigma, a place whose history is written not in books or broadcasts, but in silence, distance, and finality. In a world where satellite images peer into every crevice of the Earth and GPS can pinpoint nearly every structure ever built, North Sentinel Island remains a blank spot, an anomaly of absence. It is a reminder that even in the 21st century, not everything can be catalogued, contacted, or understood. Protected under the Andaman and Nicobar protection of Aboriginal tribes regulation and reinforced by Indian law since the year 1956, the island is one of the few remaining territories where enforced inaccessibility is not only permitted but required. No aerial surveys, no anthropological missions, and no diplomatic negotiations. This is not out of neglect, but out of respect. For anthropologists, North Sentinel represents a paradox. It is one of the most culturally significant uncontacted societies on Earth, yet studying it, at least by modern academic standards, is impossible. Unlike other indigenous groups who have partially opened their worlds to researchers, the Sentinelese have remained entirely sealed off. No known exchange of language, no recorded interviews, and no detailed census exist. Their isolation has preserved not only their genetics, but also their worldview, one completely untouched by electricity, written language, or outside influence. There is no guarantee that this isolation will last forever. Rising sea levels pose a long-term threat to the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago. Environmental shifts, increased maritime traffic, and illegal fishing could one day draw outside attention closer than ever before. Some scientists worry that even indirect contact, like drifting plastic or airborne disease, could be enough to change the tribe's trajectory permanently. Still, for now, North Sentinel Island remains silent, both figuratively and literally. It has no ports, no roads, no airstrips, and no formal name in any outside language. What little we do know has come from accidental sightings, distant aerial footage, and carefully restricted governmental observations. The gaps in our knowledge are not from oversight, but by design. The questions that surround the Sentinelese remain unanswered, not because we have not asked, but because they have refused to answer, and the world has begun to listen. In many ways, North Sentinel is more than just a geographic location. It is a mirror held up to modern civilization, reflecting our need to explore and understand, even when understanding is neither possible nor welcomed. It reminds us that some mysteries do not need solving, and that the truest form of respect is distance. As the rest of the planet accelerates toward globalization, artificial intelligence, and interconnectedness, North Sentinel stands still, firm in its silence, certain in its solitude, and unwilling to surrender its story to history books or headlines. It is a place that challenges our assumptions, humbles our knowledge, and leaves us with one final truth. Not every corner of the world was meant to be known.